We're a provider of technical services to the video games industry on an international basis. So we operate from the US right the way through to East Asia. And those services include art production. If you imagine a video game, most of what you see on the screen is graphical assets, and we have a couple of businesses that produce those graphical assets for leading game developers around the world. We also do audio recording. Again, audio is part of the content of a video game. I'm talking here about voice audio primarily. And we do that both in the original language of the video game and in the translated versions of the video game. So consider it a bit like video game dubbing. We also provide functional testing, which is testing the games in their, on the core of the game to make sure that the game behaves as expected. We then get into our language side of the business, where we're translating video games in anything up to 50 different languages for audiences around the world. And the next part of that is being able to test those games in the translated languages once everything is put back into the game, and we do that again with native speakers in secure facilities around the world. And finally, that is, a service that happens just before launch of games, particularly, or indeed once games are in live operation. The other service that we provide for live operation support, which is towards the sort of back end of the life cycle of a game, is customer support and community management. Again, as games move towards games as a service, away from a packaged product that's sold just once, now gamers, the name of the game is to keep gamers engaged with the video game for as long as possible, and obviously customer support and community management is an essential part of that. And being able to do it around the world, again in over 20 different languages, is one of our specialisms. The video games industry continues to grow apace. Overall, market analysts expect it to grow 8 to 10% a year compound for the foreseeable future. Underlying that, obviously, is higher growth in the mobile game sector, which is obviously games primarily for smartphones nowadays, which is growing much faster than that. It's probably growing 20%, 17-20% per annum. And console games as well have gone through a rejuvenation with the launch of the PlayStation 4 and the Xbox One, which happened back in the back end of 2013. So very positive general underlying growth within the video games. The bit that really interests us is the content side of video games, and content is proliferating even faster than the overall growth in the market. As games move to games as a service, so content is continuously updated. Items are added to the game, which allows gamers to pay for individual weapons, clothing, cars, you name it. So all of that leads towards some very positive sort of underlying growth drivers for our business in particular. And then in addition to that, if you consider that the video games market is fairly recent, it's only been around for 20 odd years, and it's now sort of maturing. The models of game production and game support are trending towards more established business models, particularly those that rely on outsourced services. And again, that's the space that we occupy. So a number of factors which are sort of driven by the industry, which are playing very much in our favour. We've set out to be the go-to player for blue chip video game companies that really require service on a global basis. Up until this point, there really hasn't been a consolidated supplier of services that can service what are very big, multi-billion-dollar global players on a sort of equal footing with them. So for the first time, we're now able to provide all the services within our 6 service lines, from Latin America, North America, through to South Asia, Southeast Asia, and the Far East, all hotbeds, and of course Europe, I forgot to mention that. hotbed, all hotbeds of video game development and big game markets in terms of numbers of players of video games. It's important also to understand that our clients are experimenting and proliferating the types of games that they publish or develop and the platforms on which those games are played. And this is an important point in terms of the keywords business, because unlike many companies in the video game space, we are completely agnostic as far as game platform, or in fact, the success or failure of an individual title doesn't affect us hugely. We get paid for the service that we provide, whether a game's successful or not. So, interesting point for investors. This is an opportunity in keywords to get exposure to what is an $80 billion market in video games, to get exposure to that without taking the risk of punting on an individual game and whether that's going to be successful or not. Acquisitions are an important part of our strategy going forward. It's a very fragmented market. As I've said, there is no, other than keywords really, there isn't a player operating on a global scale that can provide all these services to what are very large clients. So one of the things we're trying to do as we grow, both organically, and we do grow strongly organically, is to supplement that growth with acquisitions that will either fill in some of our service line gaps, where we believe there's a service that we can bring to our client base that we don't currently have internally, or indeed where perhaps we're getting some geographical penetration, where perhaps we feel a little bit light on the ground. So the acquisitions we've made in 2015 so far have included companies like Alchemic Dream right back in January, and that company was involved in providing customer services and community management, very much focused on the video games industry. And that represented a new line of business for us, and we're now in the process of seeding that service mentality, that service know-how, into our established studios around the world. Also acquired was Reverb, which is a company based in Brazil, Rio de Janeiro, focused on audio recording for that very large Brazilian market. Again, Latin America is a very fast-growing, in fact, I think it is the fastest-growing territory for video games. And most publishers now will publish the game in both Brazilian, Portuguese, and Latin American Spanish. Which brings us on to another acquisition we made this year called Kite Team, with a facility in Madrid, very nice new facility in Madrid, and likewise in Mexico City. Very established team in the industry, focused again on audio recording in Iberian Spanish, but also in Latin American Spanish, as they do out in Mexico City. So again, very exciting for us. It's getting us exposure, getting us talent, getting us clients focused on the South American market. And then finally, only a couple of weeks ago, we acquired a company called Liquid Development, which is in the art side of the business, which is very much focused on the game production cycle rather than the game support or publishing side of video games. And that business complements very nicely the acquisition we made back in October 2014, which was Luxor Digital, Indian-based outsourcing company for art for video games. Liquid does the same business in a way. It produces art assets, produces very high quality art assets, as does Luxor, but it does so in a slightly different way. It has it's a US-based business. Its clients are very US centric, as opposed to Luxor, which is mainly sort of Far East oriented, and particularly Japan. Additionally, the business is operationally much lower geared than the Luxor business, so it has a smaller core team and is able to flex up and down as demand dictates. So investors should expect us to continue to grow fast, as we're doing at the moment, but in a controlled fashion. We're fairly prudent people, so we do things in steps, in manageable steps. But yes, continued organic growth and plenty of acquisitions to come. So no deviation from our strategy whatsoever. We're very comfortable that we have got our strategy absolutely right. All indications from what we're seeing from our clients and from the market in general, plus of course the availability of acquisition candidates at sensible prices, just confirms that we're on something good here.